Thank you so much, Miriam. I am, as you say, Molly Flatt, comment editor at The Bookseller, and I am delighted to be moderating our next session, Making Space for Creativity. So M&P roles are inherently creative, asking us to think broadly, develop new ideas and approaches, and create campaigns that stop stakeholders and readers in their tracks. And yet, that special spark we're always chasing is also deeply elusive, in part because we all access it in different ways, and in part because the time and space required for creative thought are difficult to come by, to say the least, in the day-to-day rush of campaigns. So here with me today are three exceptionally creative humans ready to share their tools and strategies on how to step off the treadmill and frolic in the meadows of flow. Perhaps literally, don't get too comfortable. So these humans joining me are Hayley Camis, Head of Publicity for Bloomsbury, Vicky Palmer, Creative and Marketing Director at Hodder & Stoughton, and Dr. Julia F. Christensen, Neuroscientist at the Max Planck Institute for Empirical Aesthetics, and author of The Pathway to Flow, the new science of harnessing creativity to heal and unwind the body and mind. Out later this month with Penguin Random House. It's brilliant. Before we start, for our online watchers and listeners, there is a Slido where you can add any questions in, which we'll attempt to get to at the end if we have time. And there's also a poll there asking how you make space for creativity that, again, we'll try and come back to. So whether you're in the room or online, you can go and access that. There's a QR code on the back of your lanyards that will take you there. So, I warned you not to get too comfortable. Julia, in the doldrums of the afternoon, will you please kick things off with a little creativity-boosting exercise?
I will. I won't kick you, but I'll ask you, if I may, to stand up with me. Is that okay? If you like. You don't have to, but I'd like to move a bit with you. Yes, exactly. We already got the stretching going. And let's just get started with some imagery. I hope you have a sense of humor because I use imagery to move. And first of all, I'd like you to identify your right elbow or shoulder and move that. I'm mirroring you a little bit to the forward, so because we're going to be using our arms and I don't want you to hit each other. Yes, exactly. That's where we're going, exactly. So just imagine there's a beautiful tree growing in front of you, and now we are hugging this tree. Yes. Yeah, we're already getting some smiles, which is what we want, and the tree is growing. And we go back in time, and the tree shrinks again. And now we let the crown grow up and be larger. Grow again. Now I want you to picture a very large bird, and you become that bird and you fly. And right now, you're doing some of the exercises that we do in our lab to see if people get more creative, feel happier, and more motivated for their day. And now, as we're talking about the tree theme, there is an orange up there. Pick it and put it in your pocket. And pick another one up there and put it in your pocket. And become a little bit Middle Eastern and pick some more. And just curl your arms down the way you came and back up again. And you're doing something for your Carpentine syndrome now against it. And let's just fly back up and then land with your arm to the front. And another one. Just land. And you're right now actually freeing up your solar plexus. That's a nerve bundle that you've got under your breastbone, which when we sit so long during the day, it really gets compressed and we feel terrible. And let's curl the arms back down again. Good against those hands that sit like that all the day. Shake it out. And smile. And identify this cloud over your head. And take the back of your hand and just let it go away. Brush it away. And you're right now using your imagination to optimize your movement. You're making perfect ballet movements that would take ages for me to explain to you if I were to tell you what to do with your elbow and your wrist, but you're all, and now hug the tree further end and come back down again. And here we are, shade it out. I hope you all feel better as you have now used your imagination
Well done,
to make you feel better.
I mean,
Finally, you're smiling. Thank you. You looked so serious. I was scared to talk to you. Okay, we've done it.
All
good.
Ballet directors out there watching, the 4 of us are available this Christmas for any Swan Lake productions. I think it would only take, about 5 minutes of rehearsal. We're there. Julie, I do feel we need to talk about what happened there. It was very special. You are a proponent of embodied cognition, and your correctly held new book explains, genuinely, it's amazing, how we can use the mind-body connection to help us stay inspired, kind of through the chaos of everyday life. So could you give us your definition? I mean, this is going to be really easy in like 30 seconds. But your definition of how creativity works in the brain, just like that, and how it's connected to movement.
Yes, I'd love to. So as neuroscientists, we generally think of creativity, of the ability of our brain to come up with outcomes that are both unique and useful. So far, so good. And then we go and want to study it in the brain. And the important thing is, well, as we come up with these different types of outputs that we want to create, our brain connects in wonderful ways. For example, I used your imagination to make you move in very efficient ways that would have taken ages to explain to you with many, many words. Just an image of a bird immediately made you make this movement. And you put your elbow in the right position, because usually if I say, please make first position ballet arms, people go like this. But saying, hey, let's hug the tree, you immediately had the right movement. And this fluency that you can use your mind, your imagination, to actually make your movements and what you create with your body more efficient. This is, a skill that you can actually train. And I like to repeat always when I speak to everyone about creativity that we all have one of these kinds of brains. And wonderfully, this brain, we always forget that it is connected via the spinal cord, which is kind of sitting here. Yeah, it's like this, with the rest of the body. It's not just floating around up there being marvelous. It is marvelous, but it's connected to the body. And as you just said, I'm a defender of the embodiment idea, and that is that when we embody things, we use our brain in this marvelous way that we use the experiences that we have with our movement system collected throughout our lives to make efficient the outputs that we generate. So stimulating the motor cortices, which is a little bit something like an Alice band that we have over the cortex of our brain, with movement, maybe before we do a creative task, it might help us to be more creative. So use your body when you think, because we sometimes think with our body much better than if we just think with our head. So far, so good.
What do I say? And then when we were speaking on Zoom in preparation for the session, and Julia said, like, when I come to the session, can I bring my brain? And I was like, I'd prefer if you did, but yeah, you delivered on that and more. I mean, this is, oh God, the puns are so easy. This is mind-blowing stuff. But I think, oh yeah, come on, can I nestle with the brain a minute?
Inspiration.
And I think, hopefully if we've got time, we'll talk about technology and AI later, but I think in the current environment, it's such a wonderful reminder that there's something very, very uniquely human about how the human brain works and creativity works in human beings, because it is connected to the body and to movement. And that is something, if you've seen, even the most sophisticated, terrifying robots by like Boston Robotics and guys like that are really, really, really odd. They definitely don't have the kind of bodies we do. So this is a good thing. Hayley, Vicky, thanks for your patience. I think what I'd like to do is to bring us back to the industry. We're going to talk about a couple of case studies, and then we're going to weave these themes together elegantly. I'd like you to both tell me about the most creative thing you think you've done at work so far this year, and whether you think there was kind of something about the process that got you there that gave it that kind of creative edge. So, Hayley, why don't we start with you?
May I hold the brain?
Oh, may. Yes.
It'll be like the conch, yes.
Like we're at brownie camp or something.
Yeah.
Like
I didn't want to assume,
That will
but I
inspire me.
wanted to hand
Thank
it
you
to
so
you.
much. I can't believe... That's okay. It feels quite nice. I can't believe I'm on a panel with a neuroscientist. My parents will finally be proud of me. So thank you.
Need to be with me.
Oh, that's
Those people are the people that make this world go
that's
round.
really nice.
You really are.
Thank you. So my most creative thing I've done so far this year was actually a creative away afternoon for a book. The book is Want by Gillian Anderson. It's out on the 5th of September, pre-order now. And we launched the project last year in January. So it's partly Gillian, partly Bloomsbury, and with any in-house project, you can imagine there's so much admin, so much crap you have to deal with. Then we were always in the nitty-gritty with all of that. And what M&P wanted was an amazing creative away afternoon, so we could forget all of that, realise what we love about the project, how we're going to reach diverse audiences, how we're going to use the correct language to talk about the book, because the book is not just written by Gillian Anderson, it's a collection of sexual fantasies that women have written to us and Gillian from around the world. So very, very vulnerable, beautiful letters were written. So we really, really wanted to take care with this. So we thought about how we wanted to do this creative afternoon, and we knew we wanted to do it out of the office because you can't talk about orgasms and other things sitting in Bedford Square. So we thought, where's a nice neutral place where we can get in the mood, think about sex, all be really comfortable. So we thought, how about a nice hotel? That will get us in the zone. So we booked a lovely hotel, and another really, really important thing we wanted to do was have an external leader to lead the session, because we wanted everyone across all departments to be equal and everyone to contribute, which was so, so important to us, from the editorial assistant to international sales to the publisher to the publicity director, so that we can contribute and that no idea will be so stupid and outrageous. So we hired the amazing Miriam Robinson. Shout out to Miriam, who's organised this amazing day, and we created a brief with her about what we wanted to get out of the session. And what we said to her was, nothing is off limits. Don't make it too hen-do. I think that was the phrase we used. But get us all in the zone to be, revive our passion for the project, and make it the campaign the biggest book of the year. So Miriam came up with the most amazing session with us. But what you've inspired me, Julia, is what got us in that zone as well is doing an icebreaker at the beginning of the session, which really allowed the creative juices to flow. So you'll see the fruits of our labour come September when the books are out, so get excited. But what really united us as a group, a publishing team working on the book, was an icebreaker at the beginning of the session, which Miriam came up with, where to get us in the mind of how vulnerable these women were writing in their sexual fantasies to us, how lucky we were to have them, and how privileged we are to publish these works, but also to get the tone of the book. We each had our own piece of paper, and we wrote a line. We had to write our own sexual line, sort of like consequences, so that we had the anonymous nature, and then we folded it over, passed it around the table, and everyone added to it, and we read them out in the end. And that was just like your exercise earlier, was the perfect exercise to get our creative juices flowing, remind us what's important about the project and why we love working with stories such as this. And yeah, so that's definitely the most creative I've felt at work this year. So thank you, Miriam.
Wish I was there. Vicky, how about you?
I don't know how I meant to follow a brain and then...
Would you like that?
No, I definitely don't want to touch the brain.
Hotel.
I'm sorry, I love your
group
brain,
sex
Julia, but it's a bit much
fantasies.
for me. Yeah. But no, rather differently, but it was something that I think lots of you will know about. So One Day launched on Netflix earlier in the year. So it's David Nicholls' much-loved novel, been out for 14 years, and it was one of those experiences where we couldn't, it's Netflix, we didn't know anything about it. We knew what everybody else knew when it was out there, and it was one of those things where we sort of all had sort of conversations about what we were going to do, and until we saw anything, we didn't really know what level we needed to go at. So we were like, let's just, we'll watch it when everybody else can watch it. And then we'll have to see. And then I was very fortunate. I got to go and see the first 3 episodes a week early. And I was sitting there with our CEO next to us. And about 3 seconds in, she went, "Oh my God, it's going to be massive." And I was like, "Yeah, great, I've got 3 episodes to sit through." And you suddenly got the tingles of like, "Oh God, it's going to be really, really good. And are we ready for this?" And, we had sort of, good numbers in the budget, but we've all had things on Netflix and Apple and things where the adaptation just doesn't deliver on what you hope that book will. But what was really fascinating was we realised there was suddenly a totally new audience of the people who were maybe like 13, 14, probably most of you sitting here, who it was one of their sort of like first adult books they read, because Amber Kerr, there was a sort of cast Q&A at the end, and she suddenly said, "Oh, it was my favourite book," as I was sort of growing up. And so I suddenly was like, oh God, well, I mean, we can't compete with Netflix budget. The event where they did the screening, I was looking around being like, cool, yeah, you've done this. We don't have that. So I think it was just sort of letting it sit in the back of my brain, and I suddenly realised that we had some creative constraints. So it's sort of the opposite of being lovely and free. We weren't allowed to use the pack shot or the image of the cover at any size other than the pre-approved size of a paperback. Some of you working with Disney and Netflix may be finding these things are getting very, very tight in contracts. So I was like, cool, so we can't actually use our pack shot either, which has the talent on it, because otherwise it was going to lead to talent clearance. So I was like, I don't think Leo and Amber Kerr are interested in whether I'm running a campaign or not. So that was a sort of totally different set of creative challenges. So actually, I was then, and I'll sort of come on to this later, but sort of like freeing your mind, or just sort of letting your brain pick up ideas sort of wherever you are. I was scrolling Instagram one day, as I usually am, and there was a sort of old-fashioned cinema hoarding, the white screens with the black and white lines, or these sort of slide in the letters. And I suddenly was like, oh, well, that's quite cool. And I realised that what we could do was create for free, basically, because the idea is free. Obviously, you then spend money if you want to, depending on which media you take it out with. We could create a campaign totally inspired by massive billboards. You can get a Shutterstock image of a billboard. I could put our other edition on there. And all of our lines were things like, because I was like, how do you feel? Everybody was finishing the show being like, oh my God, Em and Dex, Em and Dex, I love them, oh God, and now do I want to watch it again? And I was like, well, how do you feel the Em and Dex shaped hole in your heart? Read the OG. So that was our thing. It was like, well, you have more one day. So it was basically like, how do you do that? And so we had like one line, we had about 5 different lines, all variations on that. And there was one which was entirely in emojis, because loads of people on social were just putting up reels of like crying faces, TV emojis. So we tried that. And it, the idea in itself cost us nothing. And we did then actually go and put it on real billboards, but we mocked up the billboards, didn't cost us anything other than the designer cost. So I think it was sort of slightly being forced in a totally different way to think, well, I can't be Netflix, so there's no point trying. And they're doing all this other stuff. And we don't have any talent, but what we do have is our idea, and we have the original book.
And I do think that is a thing that is so true beyond cliche, creativity with constraints, right?
Yeah.
Once you have constraints, it somehow manages to harness all these many possibilities that could happen into something much, much better, really. Okay, on to kind of more personal strategies, tools and tricks, how to keep this creativity going when you've got like massive mental load, lots of juggling, lots of pressure. Julia, you talked to me about kind of the importance of approaching creativity very much as a skill, not as a gift, as something you have to work at, like you would work at piano practice or developing any other skill, or gymnastics. How do you do that in practice? Like, how do you develop creativity as a skill, not a gift?
Yes, so this links to the whole point that I was making of brain and body being connected. And when we think of creative outputs, for me, previously, I was, like most people, probably thinking about this creative genius one day coming up with this brilliant idea. And what we're never told is that years before, probably this person had developed a creative skill over their life. And that's why at one day this output was so good. And neuroscience, little by little, is finding that out. Creativity is not something that is a given. It's something we can train. And when I started reading that science and doing experiments on creativity myself, I realized that I can apply that to myself too. So I made my creative practice very much a habit, so that I needed to, for example, for me, after an accident made a dance career impossible. I come from the ballet world, and I went out of the ballet world after not being able to move in the right way anymore. I needed to create new habits, new creative habits, because I was struggling with an unrestful mind. And today I know, of course, because I was sitting all the time. And before I had been a dancer, I had moved all the time. And sitting for our brain is a health hazard. So I needed to give my body movement to have a still mind. The WHO prescribes 180 minutes of movement, aerobic movement per week. This is not negotiable, you have to, because then you set the pathways of your brain to actually be productive and also creative and to create that skill. So I put that first. So I have to have 180 minutes of aerobic exercise. And it sounds weird, why are you doing something to your body to be able to be creative? Well, because of that, because of the mind, because it needs to be still. So to unwind this movement junkie mind of ours. And then movement junkie brain that we have, well, what is a habit? It's movement. So you probably all heard of the habit loop. It is a cue. It set off a movement, and it gets a reward because it works out dopamine showers. But dopamine showers are actually also just a learning signal. A lot about our movements and what we learn is about optimizing movements, and movements that we repeat. Our body realizes that, and our brain does too. And it says, I can't spend all of this energy on redoing this movement all the time. I'm going to pass this movement that she's constantly repeating into the implicit memory systems. So first, when I learn a skill, when I do a skill, it's effortful. And I have to think about it. I'm using my prefrontal cortex very much. But then when the brain realizes she's repeating this a lot, this passes into implicit memory systems. We might call it, it gets closer to our intuition. Well, there are some low-level systems of our brain that are important for our sense of self, for our feelings, for how our body feels from within. And we sort of get this skill wired in with those systems and with our memories. And suddenly that movement that we're doing over and over again becomes our second nature. And that's when we start to have this skill as something that we can use to express. When we're being creative, we express. And so I developed the practice of drawing out of chance. I started to draw dancers. I couldn't dance anymore, but I could draw how I wanted to move. So I draw like every day, just to have this feeling over the paper. And then I discovered expressive writing. If you just do expressive writing twice a week, 20 minutes, you set your mind into the space of expression, and you're able to do that already tomorrow because you all write. Everyone is able to write, so we can already use that as a tool for expression. But it's the same if you're a musician or a designer or anything creative. You can make it a skill. And I think the example that Vicky just gave, that suddenly, this very creative idea came out of nothingness in a sense. No, it came out of your creative habit. Your brain being able to create within constraints even. We all want this super freedom, and that's when I'm going to be really creative. So a lot of people, they go, and now I'm going to have a week's holiday and I'm going to write a book. Have you trained writing? Oh, no. So then after 2 days, I call and the person's on the sofa looking at some videos online. And that happens. Are you a bad person? No. It's just that you didn't yet create the habit. And you can. Editing, you were talking about the editing in our call, that you're editing, that's your routine. Get a routine with your creative practice. Add the technique. At some point, it will pass to your implicit memory system. It will be your second nature, and you can use it like this.
So don't wait for the muse.
Exactly, yes.
Vicky and Hayley, I'd be really interested to know, do you have any kind of personal tools, tricks, strategies you use to to practice creativity every day, or kind of, to make sure that when you need to pull it out, it's there, really?
I don't know about every day, but I think there are all those personality tests you can do to work out how creative you are or what kind of person you are at work. I knew anyway, but mine told me I like to be collaborative, I like to work with people, I like to bounce ideas off people. So I think it's really easy in your team, even if you are a junior member of staff, to talk to your team and say, look, I work best this way. I'd love to have a meeting every other week where we bounce creatively ideas together about campaigns. So we have that with my team. Every other week, we bounce ideas for our top 5 titles. And it's really creative, really useful, really collaborative. And we've carved that time out in our day, in our working life. And I think that's really, really useful. In terms of every day, blocking out time in your diary for creative work, that's just the best thing to do. I think everyone thinks publicist's job is email, like Ken's is beach, like ours is not email. It's so many other things, and if you don't have those hours in your day to creatively plan a campaign or write an amazing pitch, then you wouldn't be able to do that in your everyday life. So yeah, that's probably what I would do.
Some boundaries, for sure.
Yeah, I absolutely support the idea of having sort of creative brainstorms. Anybody who's worked in my team at Transod and Nahoda knows that in our weekly team meeting, we do all the housekeeping, we do all the bits and bobs, and then we have creative workshop. And people don't have to bring stuff, but you get a 7-minute slot. And there's something amazing that you can do with all of your wonderful colleagues sitting around you. And you can, it can be like, I'm just stuck on this copy line, or it can be, I literally don't know where to start. And in 7 minutes, and I'm probably very annoying. I can see my team over there, they're looking at me, but like, yep. But at the end, I'm always like, look at what we came up with in 7 minutes, just as a good reminder to be like, you don't need 3 hours, and those away days are amazing, but there are loads of planning, and we don't all have the luxury of doing that all the time. But the other thing that I think for me always really works is I always think of myself as a bit of a like creative magpie. Like if you just like the look of something and you don't know when you're going to use it, take a picture of it, like do whatever you need to sort of put it into your like memory bank of just things that you really liked. And I run the art team, they all do that. They have random Pinterest boards of like colour. Just they don't know when they're going to need it. But to your point, Juliet, it will be there. Like one of my favourite ever campaigns was inspired by the World Cup football coverage by The Sun. And if I tell you, it was for one of like, the biggest fiction titles I've ever worked on. But there was something about the way that they had used colour and creative became really useful for me. The books were not at all related.
I love that idea of focusing on process rather than outcome, which obviously in life is pretty much everything. But I think so often I kind of feel like when I find stuff that inspires me creatively, I should be finding a way to use it straight away. Or I see like, a painting that I love and I'm like, right, I've got to like write a book about that or something. But not endgaming it, just noticing, let it absorb, and then I guess let your brain do the work. And you guys touched a little bit there on something I think I want to dig deeper into, which is this idea of obviously creativity isn't just individual. I think there's a great temptation to see creativity as, sitting in a turret, meditating, then coming up with something blazingly beautiful. Whereas actually it can be incredibly collaborative and has to be very collaborative for M&P teams. Julia, we spoke a little bit about are there ways we can enhance creativity as a group? I think we talked a little bit about syncing, there are actually some strategies you can use to sync creatively as a group. I mean, I guess going to a hotel and talking about sex is one of them. Do you have some other examples of how we can kind of enhance group creativity?
There are many ways, of course, but remembering that our brain is a profoundly social brain in the animal kingdom is a good way to start, and that we actually need other humans to be healthy. So when we are surrounded with other humans, we are actually better than when we're alone. So now, how to make that our superpower, the other people we are with? Sometimes it needs a bit of syncing, as you're saying, syncing literally the physiology of our bodies. might sync with each other when we're doing a task together. So there's some interesting experiments where people are asked to solve a problem, build this Lego house. And so there's a group of people around a table hooked up with physiology measurements like heart rates and GSR, so the breathing response and the sweat response of their skin. And as they solve this problem, their physiology synchronizes. And the more it synchronizes, the better the outcome. So interesting. So let's just do that the other way around. Let's do stuff that synchronizes our physiology. On an away day, for example, solving a problem could be the exact right way to do it. A very clear way that humans have used throughout humanity, as it seems, is dancing together. So I might want to invite you to have a dance class together or a drum class together in the lab. Or no, you have offices in the office.
In the non-science lab. Yes, the office. That's the one.
In the creative labs of your work, of your life, yes. And there's another very interesting way how we can maybe also enhance being good with each other, and that's synchronizing our movements. Can you just imitate me briefly? Can we play a mirror game here? Please just put your hands up like this, and now follow me. As we do this, you can join. Maybe you can maybe imitate her. So then I am leading you through our friend. Hello. And then we take one hand that does this. Yeah, we make a little movement. So as we're doing this now, this is amazing. Not all animals can do that. Have you seen a cat doing this? I mean, this basic imitation skill, wonderful, yes. Okay, let's stop this again. It's so normal for us that we know we can do this, but it's a masterpiece of our brain that can make it happen, this imitation. And when we do it, for example, during a dance, or actually playing such a mirror game, maybe with some rhythm music around us, a special process happens in our brain that is called co-representation. And that's the following. When you move, my brain knows it's you moving. And when I move, it knows it's me moving. However, when we move synchronously, this neural activation somehow seems to overlap. And then our brain gets a little bit confused. It thinks a bit, you're me and I'm you. What is this? And interestingly, in experiments where one has let people do like synchronous movements together, while another group did asynchronous movements and another group just was maybe sitting together in a room, afterwards, the group that moved synchronously solved the problems they were set afterwards in a better way and more coherent. Like the videos show that they are just more goal-directed together. And when then presented to a problem and they might have to help each other, the group that moved synchronously was friendlier with each other, helpful, more helpful. So it seems something about this moving in unison, and that is so simple to do. That helps our brain set our brain off onto this synergic path that we all want to happen. So I would say, again, use the body to get at your brain via, the synchronous movement trick, which seems to do good for a creative outcome.
It's amazing. And you say it's so simple, but there's something particularly about the British culture. It's amazing how comfortable we are being like so elaborate and even kind of explicit and complicated, and let's burst all these taboos when we're talking. But the thought of simply playing a mirror game in the office makes like most people, and by most people I mean me, like sick with how like boundary pushing that is and like wildly intimate. Oh my God, let's move our hands at the same time. It is almost like we're having sex. So like, isn't that totally bizarre that we're so Victorian, we're so squeamish about using our bodies in a professional environment. And it sounds like it is literally like a magic trick. We can absolutely game our physiology because we are animals and we love to think we're not, but we totally are. A little bit on that actually, on The Office, which from now onwards I'm just going to forever call like the publishing lab. They can be tricky places to find that kind of focus and calm. And sometimes home can be even worse, actually, I find. So Vicky and Hayley, first of all, I'd love to know, do you use any hacks when you're doing these kind of creative, either individually or as a group creative thinking? you've mentioned is just getting out of the office,
Yeah.
which is great. Within office or home, do you do anything to enhance the space? I mean, make it feel more creative? Are we just going to talk about plants? I mean,
I don't know. In the office, if you're running a creative meeting, so not a big away day that costs money, I understand everyone's budgets are different. But if you are doing one in the office that you can run yourself, I always think about creativity and childhood, how you're just so free from inhibitions and it's fun. I would just recommend to make it less corporate as possible, like release your inner child, have marker pens and fun post-it notes and pin things on the wall and make things visual, like print off inspirational things around you. I think that's good. Go for a walk with a colleague to brainstorm instead of sitting in the same meeting room each time. I had a really great creative brainstorm at Pizza Express the other day. Dough balls are really stimulating. I think everywhere that's not the monotony of daily life is where you'll find creativity, I think.
yeah. Vicky?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of a post-it. Just because also the thing with post-its is you can't edit yourself. And I think that's the most crucial thing. I think for me, wherever you are not going to have your amazing creative idea sitting in front of your template sales plan or whatever your pub plans are. Or, as much as we all like to think that's going to happen. And that's usually, let's face it, when we're sort of running out of time, you're thinking, oh God, I've got to write a plan because someone needs to round up. That is not when it's going to happen. So I think about where you can do it. I fully advocate just moving somewhere else. Sometimes when I'm trying to have a creative day, if I'm at home, I'll put a different outfit on. I know it sounds a bit weird, but just sort of just free myself from all the things. And I'm still a massive fan of I have a big jug of Sharpies in all the different colours. And rather than even just like my notebook, I have a massive pad. So I have like one of those big drawing pads and I just scribble absolutely everything. So I think the not editing is the most crucial bit because you don't know which bit you're going to, going to that sort of magpie bit, you don't know which bit you're going to sort of suddenly, that bit sparks something else. So.
Sure. And Julie, you talked to me about colour a little bit, and I know you've got one of your fingernails. That's part of your colour thing, right? You said to me you use certain like colour cues to anchor you, going back to those habit loops and things, anchor you in kind of a way that will trigger your creativity. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I'd love to, because it was a game changer for me. And when we just listened to Hayley and Vicky, everything that they brought to us were cues and how those cues would set off other things. And as we were saying, the habit loop is cue, action, reward, and this just spins us through our days. Many, many habit loops. We get up in the morning, we do things, we go out, we get creative at certain times, we have to do admin. Everything cues us in this huge system of making us do us, be us. It's cue-based. And I use what I call pathway prompts. So this is a pathway prompt, the pathways to flow, as also my book is calling that. It's because here it is, the pathway to flow. And the prompts that will send us onto this, they can be different for any one of you. But let's just briefly localize our senses. How many do we have? How many senses? I hear 5.
Some people can see dead people. I can hear that in the room.
So the 5, I think you've all identified. In addition, we also have the exteroception, the perception of the space going out into nature. It engages the exteroception. Proprioception, 7, that's the body, the limbs with relation to each other, so we were moving all the time. And interoception, not introspection, interoception, that's the sense of the body from within, how we feel in the body. All of these are sources for cues that can spin our life into new habits. And using post-its, the colors, using a different setting, it can change how your mind goes into these spaces and making this whole system that makes you into the creative one. So think about things you can put into your surroundings that will kick you off into the flow state. And another thing that I remembered when you were talking about this, being in this moment and using what is there. In the book I speak about what I call the liking-wanting principle. And that is that there's so much talk about, okay, be in the moment and then you will flow. Ugh, but the now is boring. I mean, now not, but I like you. But like, if I'm in the now, how do I stay present? My mind is going everywhere. Well, we teach our mind to be very competitive, especially modern life is all about quick hits of pleasure. It's about being competitive. It's about sensation seeking. Oh, some drama. Let me have that. That engages very low-level structures of our reward system. They are rewarding those things, but they pull our mind in all directions. That's sometimes really good. We need to be competitive in our life. I'm just saying that for being creative, we sometimes need to create the space, make space for creativity, which is free of these mind hooks, as I call them. Competitiveness, quick hooks, quick pleasures, and the sensation seeking. And when we have this space, then we can create it so we like it. Use things that appeal to your senses, scents, tastes, things visually, colors that you like looking at, so that you like it while you're in the situation. Then your brain will segregate something that we call endogenous opioids and endocannabinoids, which give you this feeling of satisfaction, of pleasant hovering in the now. Well, this wanting of the principle, it makes you strive, it makes you want, it's dopamine related. Okay, so try to create the now in a way that it is likable for you, and your mind will be still and in the path. And sometimes using cues that mean something to you. This one means something to me. I won't tell you. You'll create your own. But that is a pathway to set your mind into that space. And that's because of this liking, wanting principle, which is reflected in the reward systems of our brain. I hope you could read a little more about it in my book. It's a bit longer. I hope you could understand it, but it really works.
Amazing. Well, I mean, I actually can't believe that we're out of time. And I've also been so selfish at just wanting to totally ask all my questions. We don't have any time, but we do have time to ask Slido. Do we have any results from the poll? How does the wider M&P community make space for creativity? What are the results? Oh, collaboration is king, queen, gender neutral. Oh dear, problematic monarch analogy. Group brainstorms, 35%. Just went down to 33%. Someone just had a bad brainstorm. 33%. And physical activity. So they're about analogous. They're both at about 33%. So group brainstorms and physical activity like run, walking, cycling. If you're in a less able or differently able body, I guess it could be something really small. It could just be blinking, breathing differently, just putting yourself in a different state. Getting out of the office, 24%, although now maybe the office might be a more pleasant space if we're using some of Julia's techniques. Scheduling it into my calendar, 10%. Yes. Get it, important, but sometimes really difficult to do, and then you always cancel it because you'll do the phone call or something instead. I feel like this has just been the beginning of a conversation, but it's been an incredible beginning. Thank you so much to my three amazing panelists, and may we all frolic in meadows more often.